Hi. So this is a little bit of an experiment with a 360 video, which is a new thing with YouTube. So you should be able to move around the image and look in different directions as the video plays. And what I've been told is that it works with Chrome on the Chrome browser, and it works on the YouTube player on my phone, and I think it works on the Mac, but I'm not sure about that. So if it's not working, it may be that you're not in the right browser, and if you're in Chrome and it's not working, restart Chrome and it should work. What I want to try and do is to do one of these 360 videos and do a build video at the same time, and try and use the things that you can do with a 360 video that you can't do with a regular video. So it's a little bit of an experiment, so it's a little rough at the edges. I've tried to put video into the bigger scene, so I hope all that sort of meshes up pretty well and looks good. So what I'm going to do is build a bowl out of the leftover bamboo plywood from the kitchen. So that's what I like to do. So let's get going. Hi. So I'm cutting out the strips on the table saw to make the segments for the bowl. Now I've figured out on the computer what widths I need. That's pretty simple. I'm going to do about 1.25 inches width for the kind of main body of the bowl, and then down towards the bottom they'll get wider. I'll kind of go by feel. And then, but what the computer helps me do is figure out how long each segment is, because the length of the segment then determines how big the rings are. So that's where that helps. And you could totally do that on paper, but it's nice on the computer because it's quick. Hi. So I'm doing the gluing up of the rings, and it actually went really quickly because it was plywood. The wood's all the same thickness and nice and flat, and so the rings went together really well. I found that using hose clamps actually works a lot better than using my band clamp, and I did the trick of putting two and sometimes three hose clamps together to get the bigger circumference that I needed on some of the rings. So that actually went pretty quickly, gluing up the rings. So I'm sanding all the discs because the surface on each face of each disc has to be absolutely flat, so that when I glue them together there won't be any gap between the different rings. And then once all the sanding's done, which isn't too bad, it's what's nice about the big disc sander is it gives you a big flat surface, so that when you sand something against that, it makes it really flat. It's both smooth, but it's also really flat. So that's important. So then once that's done, I can then start to glue them together. And the way I did this one was to glue the rings up in pairs, so that I would only have one glue seam at a time, so I wouldn't have them all kind of moving around at once. I could just work on just the one glue up at a time. Then once I had the pairs together, I could then glue those pairs together, and I'd have 4 together, and I'd have stacks of 4, and then I'd glue all those together. So it sort of went in steps. Then the final glue up is just to glue a ring on the bottom so that I can hold the bowl on the lathe at the chuck. And with that, because it's so far in, the clamps don't really reach that far in, so I did a thing where I take like a 2x4 and I cut it to the height of the glue up, basically, and then I can make a beam with another piece of wood, and I can clamp. That little spacer piece lets me clamp one side without trying to hold 2 clamps at once that I can just barely reach. That would be really hard. So I can clamp one side and get that clamped, and then go around and clamp the other side, and then that puts a really great force down onto the glue up and holds it in place. So once this dries up, once this sets up, we'll then go and start turning it on the lathe. It'll be fun. Okay, so we're at the lathe, and the first thing I need to do is to turn the bottom and make a tenon for the chuck to fit around. And I've glued an extra piece of the plywood onto the bottom so that I can make that tenon. And then once that's done, I can flip it around and hold the bowl with the chuck really well. Then the first thing to do once it's turned around is to do the outside and get it round so it spins a little bit smoother, and then I can turn the speed up on the lathe once I do that. Once the outside is smooth, I can then start to work on the inside, and that's a little harder because it's just a little bit harder to get at. But it goes okay. This bamboo turns pretty well. It's dry, so it's making a lot of dust. I have the dust cart on, which is one of the spots where I use it the most is actually here at the lathe when I'm doing dry wood, because it makes a lot of dust, and there's no dust collection really at the lathe. So then once the inside and the outside are done, I can sand for a bit, and this actually went pretty well on this because it cuts pretty nicely, so the tools didn't leave a whole lot of marks in the wood. So once the sanding's done, I can then flip the bowl back around and do the bottom. So I then have to cut off the foot that I've made. I planned ahead a little bit on this one, and I made a little space in the bottom of the bowl so that I can hold it again with the chuck once it's done. That's not held quite as well, but it's held enough that I can do the finish. And then the finish goes on really easily because I don't have to wrestle the bowl on a table and trying to keep it up so it isn't getting marked. It's just getting held out there in space, and I can put the finish on and not mess it up. And then the bowl's basically done, and it actually turned out pretty good. So if you're looking back here, you can see the CNC machine I've been working on for a year or so. At some point soon, it'll get finished, and I'll have some videos about it. But for now, it's still a bunch of parts. But it moves. Thanks for watching.